Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Alice Nwankwo. She was 28 years old, and she worked as a waitress in the most expensive dining lounge in the city. If you walked into that place at night, you would think you had entered another world. The lights were soft and warm, like golden oil. The tables looked like they had never seen dust. The glasses were so clear they almost looked like air. Every few seconds you heard the gentle sound of crystal touching crystal, small proud clinks that sounded like rich people laughing without using their mouths. The air smelled of expensive food, sweet wine, and perfume that stayed behind even after people walked away. And on nights like that night, when service was peaking, the staff moved like soldiers. Not because they were proud, because they were afraid. They rushed between tables with straight backs and tight smiles, careful not to spill anything, careful not to breathe too loudly, careful not to make a mistake that would be remembered. Alice moved with them too, but her own movement was different.
Here you are.
She was careful. Not slow, just careful. Because every step hurt. She had been standing for 10 hours. 10 hours of carrying trays. 10 hours of bending and rising. 10 hours of smiling at people who did not smile back. 10 hours of hearing her name spoken like it did not matter. Her back was burning the way dry wood burns, quietly but steadily, like the pain had decided it would not stop until she stopped breathing. But she did not stop. She could not stop. Under her neat uniform, her body was tired. Under her polite face, her mind was tired too. And her shoes were a story by themselves. They were cheap knockoffs she bought from a street stall because she needed something that looked proper. From a distance they looked fine, black, simple, almost respectable. But inside they were already broken. The sole of the right one had started splitting at the bottom, like a mouth that could not stay closed. Each time she crossed the kitchen floor, which was always wet, always slippery, always smelling of soap and heat, moisture pushed in through the opening. Not enough to soak her foot, just enough to remind her every time that she was wearing something that was falling apart. It was a small thing, but small things can break a person when they happen again and again. Alice passed through the kitchen doors with a tray in her hand, and she heard the voice that ruled the night. "Vance, move!" The voice was sharp, fast, and impatient. Victor Adebayo, the floor manager. He was standing near the service station, watching everything like a hawk that believed mistakes were sins. Victor did not speak the way other people spoke. His words came out like commands. "Table 3 needs their food carved in front of them." They said the last waitress did it like she was cutting firewood. He turned his head slightly, eyes scanning again. "And table 5 is complaining the toppings are too thin, as if we are feeding them from our own pockets." His mouth tightened with anger, but it was not anger for the customers. It was anger for the staff, because their complaints fell on the workers like stones. Alice came closer, her arms steady even though her waist felt weak. "Yes, sir," she said softly. Her voice was steady, not because she was strong, but because she had learned that if you sound tired in a place like that, people will use it against you. Victor looked at her quickly, not like someone looking at a human being, but like someone checking a tool. "Don't waste time," he said. "Yes, sir," Alice repeated. She turned away and continued moving, careful not to let the tray shake, careful not to let the pain in her feet show in her face. Around her, laughter floated over the tables. Soft music played. People talked about money like it was air, like it would never finish. But Alice did not hear their words properly. All she heard was her own heartbeat and the quiet, ugly sound of her shoe sole opening again on the wet floor. And she kept walking. Because when you are poor, you learn early that pain does not stop bills. It only follows you while you work. She stepped out of the kitchen and into the dining area again, and the noise swallowed her like water. Glasses clinked, cutlery tapped plates. Soft laughter rose and fell like music. The rich guests sat comfortably, leaning back in their seats, speaking slowly, as if time belonged to them. Alice passed between their tables with a tray balanced on her palm, her shoulders tight, her face calm. And as she moved, she noticed the same thing she noticed every night. They did not look at her. Not really. Some people looked through her, the way you look through a glass window when you are more interested in what is outside. To them, she was not a person. She was a moving tray, a hand that brought food, a body that cleared plates, a voice that said good evening and enjoy your meal, then disappeared. A woman in a long dress turned her head slightly, not to greet Alice, but to avoid brushing against her as Alice passed. The woman's eyes did not hold any apology. It was the same expression people used when they moved away from a wet wall. A man lifted his finger without looking up. "Hey, psst." Alice stopped beside him, polite smile already in place. He didn't say her name. He didn't ask her name. He didn't even try. "You there," he said, still looking at his phone. "Tell them to bring more napkins." "Yes, sir," Alice replied. Another table called out, "Girl!" The word hit her ear like a slap, even though it was spoken casually, like it meant nothing. She was 28, not a girl. She had bills older than some people's marriages. But she still turned, because she needed the job. "Yes, Ma," she said, because Ma was safer than silence. As she leaned slightly to place a plate down, a small movement of her head caught the light, and for a second, the scar near her eye became visible. It was small, close to the left side, near the corner of her eye. A faint line that looked like it had healed but never truly went away. It came from a day 2 months ago when she had fainted from exhaustion right inside the kitchen. She had been standing too long, eating too little, working too hard. Her body simply gave up. When she fell, her face hit a sharp corner of a prep table. She woke up on the cold floor with her head spinning, her cheek burning, and Victor's voice above her saying, "Stand up, don't embarrass us here." There was no, "Are you okay?" No, "Let me call someone." Just, stand up. Even now, when Alice touched that scar with her fingers in the quiet of her room, it reminded her of something she did not like to admit. That she was breaking slowly. But she still kept going. Because she had no choice. She needed this job. She needed the money that came with the job, even if it was small. She needed it because there were things waiting for her outside that lounge, real things, heavy things, things that did not care whether her feet hurt or her back burned. And as she moved from table to table, collecting empty plates and placing fresh cutlery, she felt something tightening inside her chest. Not anger exactly, just tiredness. The kind that comes when people refuse to see you properly. She was tired of being girl. Tired of, "Hey you." Tired of, "You there." Tired of standing close enough to people to smell their perfume and expensive wine, yet still being treated like she did not have a name. Her name tag said Alice in bold letters. But most nights, it felt like it was invisible too. Alice forced her face to stay calm. She forced her voice to remain gentle. She picked up another tray, and she kept moving. Because in her world, even dignity was something you had to postpone until you could afford it. But as she walked, something heavy sat inside her mind. Not the food. Not the trays. A memory. It came quietly, the way old pain often comes. Not with noise, just with weight. Because the truth was simple. She wasn't always here. 2 years ago, if someone had told her she would be standing in a dining lounge for 10 hours a day, smiling at strangers who called her girl, she would have laughed. Not because she thought life was easy, but because she had plans. Real plans. 2 years ago, Alice Nwankwo was a scholar. Not the kind people just say to sound big. She was the kind who stayed awake at night reading, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because her mind refused to rest when it met something interesting. She studied linguistics, words, language, the way people spoke, the way people were treated based on how they spoke. And she was good at it. So good that when she applied for a prestigious scholarship, she got it. It was the kind of scholarship that did not come easily, the kind that made people call to congratulate you as if you had won an election. It was her chance to travel, to see the world, to sit in classrooms where nobody laughed at your accent, to meet people who also loved thinking, people who would not look at her like she was strange because she liked books. For the first time, Alice felt like her life was about to open, like a door was finally unlocking. She remembered that day clearly. She had been sitting in the small office of her supervisor, Dr. Grace Eze, a woman who did not waste words. Dr. Eze looked at her printed proposal for a long time. The room was quiet, except for the sound of paper shifting gently under her fingers. Alice's heart was beating fast. Then Dr. Eze raised her eyes and said slowly, as if she was measuring each word before she released it, "Alice, this work is rare." Alice held her breath. Dr. Eze nodded once. "It is authentic, and you are thinking out of the box." Those words entered Alice's body like warmth, because praise from Dr. Eze was not something you got easily. Dr. Eze was not the type to clap for you just to encourage you. If she praised you, it meant you deserved it. Alice's research was not just about grammar and spelling. It was about power. It was about Nigeria. About the way people were treated depending on the way they spoke. About how some people were mocked in public because their English was not fine. About how someone could enter an office, speak with a strong village accent, and suddenly everybody would look down on them, even if they were intelligent. About how a child could grow up speaking a language at home, then start feeling ashamed of it because school taught them that only English sounded educated. About how certain local languages were slowly disappearing from some homes, not because the languages were useless, but because people were afraid their children would be judged. Alice wrote about the way we used language as a weapon in Nigeria, how we used it to divide ourselves, how we used it to decide who was smart and who was nothing, how a person's voice could determine whether they got respect, a job, or even simple kindness. She wrote about how dialects within the same language were laughed at, how some people changed the way they spoke just to survive, how slowly, year after year, communities began to lose parts of themselves, not through war, but through shame. And when her scholarship came through, Alice felt like the world was finally agreeing with her, that her voice mattered, that her mind mattered, that she was not just a girl. That day, she did not even wait to get home. She stood outside the department building with the scholarship email open on her phone, her hands shaking. Then she called her father, Mr. Nwankwo. Her father was a quiet man, the kind who worked hard and did not talk too much, the kind who carried burdens silently so the people he loved would not feel them. He picked up on the second ring. "Alice," he said, his voice already careful, as if he was listening for both good news and bad news. "Daddy," she whispered, because her throat was tight. It came. There was a pause, then another. "What came?" he asked, though his voice was already changing, already hopeful. "The scholarship," Alice said, and her voice broke. "Daddy, I got it." On the other end of the phone there was silence again. But it was not empty silence. It was the kind that happens when a grown man is trying not to cry. Then she heard it. A soft, shaky breath. And then her father's voice, thick with emotion. "My brilliant daughter," he said. Alice swallowed hard. "Daddy." "I knew," Mr. Nwankwo said, and now he was crying openly. He didn't even try to hide it. "I knew God would not waste your brain." Alice stood there with tears rolling down her face, holding the phone close as if she could hold his love with it. Her father kept speaking between tears. "My brilliant daughter," he repeated. "You will go far. You will see the world. You will meet your kind of people. You will not suffer like me." And in that moment, Alice believed him. She believed she was leaving this kind of life behind forever. She didn't know yet that life can turn suddenly. Sometimes in one phone call. Sometimes in one night. It happened when everything still felt bright. When Alice was still walking around with that scholarship letter in her head, like a song that refused to stop playing. She had already started planning. What to pack. What books to take. Who to message. How to prepare her mind for a new world. Even her father's voice was different in those days. Lighter. Hopeful. Then one night, the phone rang. It was late. The kind of late that makes your heart jump before you even pick up. Alice stared at the screen and saw a number she didn't know. She answered quickly. "Hello?" A woman's voice came through, shaky and rushed. "Alice? Is this Alice Nwankwo?" Yes, who is this? It's Mrs. Ahmed from your father's work side, the woman said, breathing hard as if she had been running. My dear, don't shout, don't panic. But your father, he collapsed. Alice's body went cold. Collapsed. What do you mean collapsed? She asked, already standing up, already moving without knowing where she was going. He just fell, Mrs. Ahmed said. 1 minute he was working, the next minute he was on the ground. They carried him. They are taking him to hospital now. Alice's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then she forced the words out. Which hospital? Mrs. Ahmed told her. Alice didn't even end the call properly. Her hand was shaking so much the phone almost slipped. She stood there for 1 second, the room spinning. Then she moved. Fast. She grabbed her bag, her phone charger, anything her hands touched. She didn't think about makeup. She didn't think about clothes. She didn't think about anything except one thing. Her father must not die. On the way, she called her mother, Mrs. Nwankwo, the woman who had raised her with tough love and tired eyes. Her mother had not always been the way she was now. Before, she was strong, loud, full of energy. But life had taken its own share from her. Years earlier, after Alice's younger brother died from a sickness they did not have money to treat properly, something in her mother changed. She became quieter, more careful, like someone who had learned that joy can be punished. She still lived with Mr. Nwankwo, still cooked, still cleaned, still did small trading when she could. But her heart always looked like it was holding fear. So when Alice called her that night, her mother picked up with panic already in her voice. Alice, what is it? What happened? Daddy collapsed, Alice said, and her voice broke. They are taking him to hospital. There was a sharp breath on the line. Then her mother began to cry. Jesus, Jesus, she kept saying, like saying it could stop what was coming. Alice found herself begging even though she didn't mean to. Mummy, please, meet me there, please. I'm coming, her mother said quickly. I'm coming now. By the time Alice arrived at the hospital, the air inside the emergency area felt thick. Bright lights, fast footsteps, people sitting on benches with tired faces, the smell of sweat, antiseptic, and fear. She saw her mother first, standing with her wrapper tied tight, her eyes red, hands shaking. Alice, her mother whispered, as if speaking too loudly would make it worse. Where is he? Alice asked, already crying. They led her to a door. She saw her father on a bed. His eyes were open, but he looked far away. One side of his mouth drooped slightly. His left arm lay strange, as if it didn't belong to him. His speech was not clear. When he tried to say her name, it came out slow, broken. Lee. Alice held his right hand and started shaking. Daddy, I'm here, she said, forcing strength into her voice. I'm here. The doctor came out soon after, calm but not kind, not cruel, just tired, like a man who had said the same thing too many times. He had a stroke, the doctor said. Alice's head rang. A stroke? She repeated. The doctor nodded. The left side is affected. Speech may be affected too. We will do our best, but recovery is uncertain. He needs proper care, medication, and therapy. Alice swallowed hard. How much? She asked, even before she could fully understand the diagnosis. The doctor looked at her, then looked away. You need to make payment first, he said, like it was the most normal sentence on earth. Alice blinked. Payment first? Yes, he said. Bring money first. Alice felt something crack inside her chest. But he is lying there, she said, her voice rising. He just collapsed. You can't. The doctor's face remained the same. Madam, I understand, he said, but his tone did not carry understanding. That is the process. That night, Alice learned a hard Nigerian truth again. In many places, sickness is not only about the body, it is also about money. If you don't have it, you beg. If you don't beg well, you lose. They asked for money for tests, money for drugs, money for scans, money for admission, money for oxygen. Every time Alice thought, okay, we have paid, another paper came, another list, another amount. Pay before treatment. Buy the medication outside. Bring the money for physiotherapy. Bring money for nursing care. Bring money for this one. Bring money for that one. And her father was still lying there, trying to breathe properly, trying to move a hand that was not moving. Alice didn't sleep. She didn't even sit properly. She stood in corners making calls, calling people she hadn't spoken to in years, calling old friends, calling aunties who liked to gossip, calling classmates, calling anybody that could send anything. Some people promised and didn't send. Some people sent small amounts and apologized. Some people didn't pick up at all. Alice's mother sat on a bench, pressing her fingers together, whispering prayers like her life depended on it. At one point, her mother held Alice's hand and said quietly, "We will not lose him. We cannot lose him." And Alice nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. Because even if she was scared, she refused to accept death. Not her father. Not the man who cried and called her my brilliant daughter. She used her scholarship money. The money meant for flights, for books, for a new life. She watched it disappear into hospital bills. One payment, then another, then another. She sold what she could. Her small laptop, her wristwatch, the gold chain her mother had kept for years, for emergency. This was the emergency. She borrowed money. From neighbors. From church women. From one lecturer who remembered her and took pity. Still, it was never enough. Because with sickness, money finishes quickly. And the worst part was not even the bills. The worst part was watching her father struggle. Watching him try to speak and fail. Watching him try to lift his left hand and nothing happened. Watching his eyes look at her as if he was trying to say, "I'm sorry my sickness is ruining your life." Alice would squeeze his right hand and whisper, "Don't think like that. Just stay alive." Because that became her new prayer. Not scholarship, not travel, not the world. Just this, let my father live. And she meant it with everything in her. But prayers do not pay bills. Time passed. The hospital did not stop counting days. And money did not stop finishing. So Alice did what she had to do. She took the job. Now, back in the present, Alice's life was nothing like the life she once planned. She lived in a tiny one-room place, one of those face me, I face you houses. A long building with many rooms lined up like matchboxes. One narrow walkway in the middle. Doors facing doors. If you opened your door, you were opening it into someone else's life. You could hear everything. Someone frying pepper. Someone arguing with their spouse. Someone's baby crying. Someone coughing through the night. You didn't need to ask how your neighbors were doing. Their problems entered your room by themselves. There was usually a shared bathroom at the end of the passage, a shared tap outside, a shared bucket somebody always forgot to return. Privacy was something you imagined, not something you had. Alice's own room was small. A thin mattress on the floor. A plastic wardrobe that leaned to one side. One standing fan that made noise like it was suffering too. A small table close to the wall, serving as kitchen counter, study desk, and everything. That was where her life sat now. On that table there was one envelope. Not fancy. Just an old brown envelope, the kind people use for documents. Alice had written on it herself with black marker. Money for Daddy. The writing was bold because she needed to see it every day. So she would not forget why she was suffering. So she would not spend the money on something else and later regret it. Inside the envelope was a small amount. Not enough to rest. Not enough to breathe. Just a small amount she had saved from humiliation. From 10-hour shifts. From fake smiles. From being called girl by people younger than her. From standing until her legs went numb. Barely enough for 1 week of proper medication. 1 week. That was how her life was measured now. Not in months. Not in years. In weeks. Sometimes in days. Because her father was still in the hospital. Still there. Still fighting. And the doctors were not doing charity. The truth was simple and sharp. If payment stopped, treatment would stop. If treatment stopped, her father's hope of recovery could disappear. There were hospitals where they would look at you and say it without shame. If you cannot pay, take your person home. As if a sick man was a bag of rice. As if hope could be carried in a nylon bag. Alice could still remember that fear clearly. The fear of her father being pushed out because money finished. So she worked. Every day. Even when her back burned. Even when her shoes opened at the sole. Even when she woke up with tiredness still sitting inside her body. She used to believe the job was temporary. She used to tell herself, let me just do it for some months. Once Daddy gets better, I will go back to my life. But months became 1 year. 1 year became almost 2. And instead of improving, everything began to feel like a trap. Because she was not truly saving. She was not building. She was only surviving. Barely saving. Barely surviving. The money entered her hand, and before she could breathe, it left again. Bills. Transport. Hospital. Medication. Therapy. Food. And again. And again. Sometimes when she returned from work late at night, she would sit on the mattress in the dark and stare at that envelope. Not because she liked it, but because it was the only proof that her suffering meant something. Then she would count the money slowly, with tired fingers. And every time she counted it, the same thought would come into her mind, quiet but heavy. God, please let this be enough to keep him there. Because if her father lost that hospital space, he might lose everything. And Alice knew it. That was why she woke up again the next day. That was why she wore the uniform again. That was why she kept smiling at people who did not see her. Because there are some things that make a person endure anything. And for Alice Nwankwo, that thing was simple. Her father must not be sent away. That was why she woke up again the next day. That was why she wore the uniform again. That was why she kept smiling at people who did not see her. That night the lounge was full again. The kind of full that made the air feel heavy. The kind of full that made trays feel heavier. Alice had just finished dropping off plates at one table when she heard Victor's voice again. But this time, it wasn't on sharp. It was tense. The kind of tension that comes when someone important has entered the room. Alice, he called,
calm her down.
and for once he used her
Yes,
name.
sir. Right away.
Come here.
Do it quietly.
Alice walked quickly to him, careful not to show how tired she was. Victor Adebayo stood by the host stand, his tie straight, his face tight. He was the floor manager, mid-40s, always smelling faintly of cologne, always acting like the lounge was his personal kingdom. He believed mistakes were sins, and staff were the easiest people to punish for them. He leaned closer to Alice, lowering his voice like what he was saying was a secret. Table 7,
Alice,
he said,
you'll handle this
you will
personally.
handle them
Yes, of
personally.
course.
This is important.
Alice
No
nodded
mistakes.
immediately.
Understood. I'll take care of it.
Okay, sir. Victor's eyes narrowed. I mean it, he said. No mistakes, no attitude, no drama. Alice's stomach tightened. Yes, sir. Victor looked past her toward the entrance and then back at her again. These are not normal rich people, he added, his voice tight. This is serious money. Serious money. In Victor's mouth, those words meant only one thing. If anything goes wrong, you will be the one to pay for it. Before Alice could ask anything else, a slim young man appeared beside her, almost bouncing with excitement. Table 7, he whispered. This was Toby Okiki, 19 years old, new staff, still wearing that wide-eyed look of someone who believed the world was fair if you worked hard. He worked as a junior staff, refilling water, clearing small plates, running quick errands. He loved listening to rich people's conversations like it was free entertainment. His face was glowing like he had just seen a celebrity. Alice, he whispered again, closer
Alice.
now. Do you know who just entered? Alice kept her eyes forward. Who? Toby swallowed. It's him. Him who? Toby's voice dropped to a dramatic whisper, like the walls were listening. William Adeyemi. Alice blinked. The name wasn't strange. Even if you were poor, you still heard certain names. William Adeyemi was one of those names that moved around like news itself, always appearing in headlines, always connected to big deals, big buildings, and big money. Toby leaned in even more, almost vibrating. That man is a billionaire, he whispered. The real kind, always in business news, big man with better doing. The way he said it made it sound like a praise name. Alice didn't respond, not because she didn't believe him, But because billionaire or not, it was still another customer. And she had learned that rich people could be the softest or the worst. Sometimes you didn't know until they opened their mouth. As Alice started toward the service station to prepare Table 7's menus, another woman touched her arm briefly. Alice. It was Sandra Ibrahim, the bartender. Sandra was in her early 30s, slim and sharp-eyed, with a calm face that looked like it had seen too much and learned not to panic. She had worked in places like this long enough to understand people. She could tell trouble before it arrived. Her voice was low.
You
Be careful,
Alice.
Sandra said.
I will. I promise.
Alice paused. Why? Sandra glanced toward the entrance, then back at Alice. He didn't come alone, she said. Alice's chest tightened. Who came with him? Sandra's lips pressed together before she spoke the name, like it tasted bitter. Cynthia Maduka. Alice didn't know the woman personally, but the way Sandra said the name told her everything. Sandra continued quietly, her words controlled. That woman is arrogant, she said. She behaves like everyone is beneath her. Alice's fingers tightened slightly around the menu folder. Sandra leaned closer. She came here before, she added. She rejected dishes like she was tasting poison, insulted the lounge like it was a roadside place. She spoke to the servers like they were not human beings, like they were slaves purchased from the open market. Alice felt heat rise in her stomach, not because she was surprised, but because she understood. Some people didn't need to hit you to hurt you. They used words. They used money. They used your position. Sandra squeezed Alice's arm gently, like a warning and comforting one. Just do your job, she said. Don't let her pull you into anything. Alice nodded slowly. Okay. As Alice turned to walk away, she passed the kitchen doors and caught sight of the head chef. Chef Mike Ajayi. A thick-set man in his late 40s, clean-shaven, always serious. He ran the kitchen like a disciplined man who believed food was dignity. Staff feared him, but they also respected him because he was fair. Strict, but fair. Tonight, Chef Mike had stepped slightly out of the kitchen, his chef coat bright under the light. He was looking toward the dining room, and he had gone still. His hand rested on the door frame. His face was tight. His eyes didn't move. It was the look of a man who could smell trouble from far away. Alice followed his gaze and saw them. A tall man in a well-cut suit walking in with slow confidence. Beside him, a woman dressed like money and pride, her chin raised slightly as if the room should be grateful she entered. Even before Cynthia Maduka spoke a word, Alice could feel it. This table was not going to be normal. And Victor's warning echoed in her mind again. Table 7. Handle them personally. No mistakes. Alice took one slow breath. Then she walked toward table 7 with the menus in her hand and her smile ready, steady on the outside, careful on the inside, like a person entering a place where one wrong step could cost her everything. As she got closer, she could feel eyes turning. Not everyone, but enough. The table carried weight, the kind of weight that made other people lower their voices without knowing why. Alice reached the table and stopped at the right distance, the way she had been trained. She placed the menus down gently, one in front of the man, one in front of the woman. Her smile stayed in place, professional and calm. "Good evening," she said. "Welcome. My name is Alice. I will be attending to you tonight." The man barely moved. William Adeyemi sat with the posture of a man who had never been told no. Back straight, shoulders relaxed, one arm resting on the table like the table belonged to him. His eyes moved slowly, not in a rush, not curious, just certain. He didn't smile, but he didn't need to. He carried confidence the way some people carried perfume. Beside him sat Cynthia Maduka. Sandra was right. Cynthia was dressed like money and pride.
Oh, it's absolutely
Her
stunning.
dress looked expensive in a quiet, dangerous way. Smooth fabric that caught the light as she moved, jewelry that didn't shout but still made people look. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair was neat, laid down like every strand knew its place. She had loud confidence, but it was the kind that came with control, the kind that said, "I will not raise my voice because I don't need to." As Alice stood there, Cynthia's eyes moved over her. Slowly. Not like a normal glance, like inspection. Her gaze dropped to Alice's name tag first. Alice. Then her eyes slid down, all the way to her shoes. The cheap black knockoffs that tried to look respectable. The same shoes that were already splitting underneath. Cynthia's lips curved slightly. Not a warm smile. A small smile that looked like someone had just found something to play with. Alice kept her face calm. She did not look down. She did not shift. She had learned that if you show shame, people will press it deeper. Still, her back burned as she stood there. Her feet throbbed inside the broken shoes. And she could feel Cynthia's gaze like a finger poking a bruise. Alice opened her mouth again, keeping her voice steady. "May I offer you something to start with? We have fresh—" Cynthia cut in immediately, her voice sweet like sugar. "Oh, don't worry," she said with a bright, polite laugh. "Just take your time." Alice paused slightly, then nodded. "Yes, Ma." Cynthia raised one hand, still smiling. "And please," she continued, her tone soft, almost friendly. "Try not to shake too much when you're carrying things, okay?" The words landed gently, but they were not gentle. They were the kind of insult that came dressed as advice. The kind of insult you couldn't fight without looking like the problem. Alice's smile stayed on her face, but it tightened at the corners. "Yes, Ma," she said quietly. Cynthia's eyes flicked to the name tag again, like she was reminding herself that Alice had a name, but she would not use it. Then she leaned back slightly and added, still with that same fake sweetness, "You people work so hard. Sometimes I wonder how you do it, standing all day like that." She glanced at Alice's shoes again and gave a small chuckle. "It must be very challenging." William said nothing. He simply sat there looking at the menu as if none of it mattered. As if Alice was only part of the furniture. Alice felt heat rise in her chest. Not wild anger, just that quiet sting that comes when someone tries to reduce you in public. But she swallowed it. Because she needed this job. She needed her father to stay in that hospital. So Alice nodded slightly, like she had not heard the insult hiding inside the smile. "Yes, Ma," she said again. Then she opened the menu gently and began, calmly, as if she had a shield around her voice. "Our specials tonight include—" Alice was still speaking when Cynthia lifted her hand again, like Alice's voice was background noise. Cynthia's smile stayed on her face, bright and soft. But her eyes were sharp. "Actually," Cynthia said, turning slightly in her chair, "I'll order first." Alice nodded politely. "Yes, Ma." Cynthia looked at the menu for only 2 seconds, barely enough to read anything properly. Then she raised her eyes to Alice and began to speak. But it wasn't English. And it wasn't even the kind of foreign language people used casually. It sounded old, strange, difficult. The kind of language that didn't belong in normal conversation. The words rolled out of Cynthia's mouth slowly with confidence, like she was reading from a secret book. Alice froze for half a second. Not because she didn't understand what Cynthia was saying, but because she understood exactly why Cynthia was saying it. This was not normal ordering. This was a performance, a show, a trap dressed in fine pronunciation. Cynthia spoke again, still in that same uncommon foreign dialect, and then stopped. She leaned back in her chair as if she had just done something impressive. And she looked at Alice with that same fake sweetness, waiting for confusion, waiting for embarrassment, waiting for Alice to stammer and rush away. Around them, the dining area began to change. It happened quietly at first. A woman at the next table paused mid-sentence. A man who had been laughing too loudly suddenly lowered his voice. Somebody turned their head slightly. Not fully, just enough to listen. Because rich people loved drama, especially when it involved someone below them. Alice could feel it. The air around table 7 had become tighter, like the room was holding its breath. At the side station, Peter Ocon, the wine guy, lifted his head. Peter was in his late 50s, always calm, always professional, with years of experience serving people who acted like they owned the world. His face barely changed most times. But now, his eyes narrowed slightly. He knew. He understood the language enough to know Cynthia wasn't trying to be classy. She was trying to cut.
Inside the kitchen, Chef Mike had been moving between pots and plates. But the moment Cynthia started speaking, he stopped. His hand paused in the air, holding a spoon. His eyes lifted toward the dining area, and his face went still again.
He knew too. Not the full meaning of every word maybe, but the intention. Because humiliation has a smell, and he had smelled it before. Cynthia turned her head a little and glanced at William. Not a normal glance. A proud one. The kind that said, "Are you seeing this? See how polished I am. See how far above everyone I am." William finally looked up from the menu. His lips did not smile fully, but something like amusement flickered in his eyes. A small reaction, enough to encourage Cynthia. He didn't stop her. He didn't warn her. He didn't say, "That's enough." He just watched, relaxed, like he was watching a small joke. And his silence became part of it. Alice stood there with her hands gently holding the menu, her face calm on the outside. But inside her, something shifted, because she had seen this kind of thing before. Not in this exact form, but in the same spirit. People using language the way they used money, to make others feel small, to remind them of their place. Cynthia leaned forward slightly, still smiling. "Well?" she asked sweetly. "Do you understand what I said?" The question sounded innocent, but it wasn't. It was a blade covered in perfume, and now everyone was listening, waiting to see if the poor waitress would break. Alice stood there for a moment, still holding the menu. She could feel the room's eyes like heat on her skin. Not only Cynthia's eyes, other eyes too. The curious ones, the judging ones. The ones that loved watching someone smaller struggle. From the host stand, Victor was watching. Alice didn't need to turn fully to know. She could feel his attention. Victor's face was tight, his jaw working slightly as if he was doing calculations in his head. Alice knew that look. It was the same look he always wore when rich customers were involved. The usual math. Protect the rich customer. Sacrifice the staff. If the rich customer smiled, the lounge remained safe. If the staff cried, it didn't matter. Alice's throat went dry. Her first instinct was the one she had been trained to use. Swallow it. Apologize. Pretend to be confused. Go and call someone else. Disappear back into the shadows. She almost did it. Almost. But then something cracked open inside her. Not anger. Not pride. Something deeper. A memory. A voice. The version of herself that once sat in classrooms and spoke about language like it was a living thing. The version of herself that argued with confidence and didn't shrink. The version of herself her father had cried for. My brilliant daughter. Alice looked at Cynthia properly for the first time. Not as a customer. Not as a woman wearing expensive clothes. But as a person trying to break another person for entertainment. Alice took one slow breath. Then she opened her mouth. And she answered Cynthia. In the same dialect Cynthia had used. Perfectly. Calmly. Clearly. Her pronunciation was controlled, like each word had been measured before it left her lips. The effect was immediate. Cynthia's smile froze. Her eyes widened just slightly. The table beside them went silent. Across the room, someone's laughter died in their throat. Alice did not stop there. She continued speaking in that same dialect for a few seconds, giving Cynthia the exact answer to her question, the exact description of what she asked for, like it was normal, like it was nothing. Then smoothly Alice switched. Not back to English. She switched into a more formal, cleaner version of the same language, like a person stepping from a crowded street into a quiet office. And in that formal tone, she corrected Cynthia. Gently, but sharply. Like a knife that didn't need to shout. You said that word wrongly, Alice said, still calm, still respectful. In this context, the correct word is this. And the sound you used on that last part, it should be softer. Her voice was steady. No trembling. No begging. Just truth. Cynthia stared at her, blinking slowly like her brain was struggling to catch up. William's head lifted fully now. His amusement disappeared. Shock came first. Then something else. Discomfort. The kind of discomfort that comes when you realize the person you are sitting with has embarrassed you too. Alice paused. And then she spoke in English again, very simple, very clear. She kept her tone respectful, but she did not lower herself. "Madam," she said quietly, "this isn't about food." The room held its breath. Alice continued. "You are trying to shame me?" Cynthia's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Alice's heart was beating fast, but she kept going. "Language is not decoration for pride," she said. "It is not something you wear like jewelry to make people feel small." Her voice carried not because she was shouting, but because the whole room had gone quiet. Alice looked at Cynthia without hatred, just honesty. "Some languages died," she said, "because powerful people used them to erase others. They made people feel stupid for speaking their own tongue. They made people feel dirty for sounding different." Her eyes tightened with something she tried to control. "You know how it is," she added, her voice still calm. "Even here, in our own country, people laugh when someone speaks English with a village accent. People refuse to respect a person because of how their words come out. A person can be wise, but because they don't sound posh, people treat them like nothing." That line landed, because it was true. And truth has a way of entering people's chest like weight. Alice finished softly. "So please," she said, "order because you are hungry, not because you want to make someone feel small." Silence. Deep silence. The kind where you can hear small things, like the clink of a spoon far away. Cynthia's face tightened. Her smile was gone now. What remained was a hard look, like a person trying to hold back embarrassment and anger at the same time. William's eyes moved between Cynthia and Alice. His jaw tightened slightly. He did not look amused anymore. At the kitchen door, Chef Mike stood with his arms folded. And for the first time that night, the stern chef's mouth curved. Not a loud smile. A small one. The kind of smile a person gives when they witness justice and don't want to clap. Alice stood there with her notepad, her hands steady. And for a moment, in that expensive room full of people who treated her like air, Alice Nwankwo was not invisible. But moments do not last long in places like that. The room slowly returned to itself. A chair shifted. Someone cleared their throat. A glass clinked softly. Conversation tried to start again, but it came back quieter, careful, like people were afraid to step on the silence that had just happened. At table 7, the meal continued, but the tension stayed. It sat on the table like an extra plate no one asked for. Cynthia forced a smile. It was the kind of smile that looked right from far away, but close up, it was wrong. Her lips were curved, but her eyes were not smiling at all. Her eyes were full of things she was trying to hide. Hatred, anger, jealousy, all at once mixed together like poison in a glass. She turned her face slightly, as if she was calm, as if nothing had happened. But she kept looking at Alice, not like a customer looking at a waitress, like someone watching a person they wanted to punish. William picked up the menu again. He cleared his throat and began to order normally. Short answers. Simple English. No show. No performance. Just control. He spoke like a man trying to pull the night back into his hands. "I'll take that," he said, pointing lightly. "And the other one." Alice nodded, writing quickly. "Yes, sir." William didn't look up much. He acted like he wanted the whole thing to disappear. But the discomfort was still on his face. The kind of discomfort that comes when someone realizes their table has become a small scandal. Cynthia barely ate when the food arrived. She cut small pieces and moved them around her plate like she was not hungry. Sometimes she lifted her fork and dropped it again, as if eating was now too normal for her anger. Her eyes kept following Alice anytime Alice walked past. Anytime Alice stopped to attend to another table. Anytime Alice laughed softly at a customer's request. Cynthia watched like she was counting something. Like she was planning something. Alice did her work the way she always did. She served the dishes, she refilled water, she checked other tables, she stayed respectful. but her body could feel the danger. Because shame is not always the end of a problem. Sometimes shame is the beginning. Later, when Alice returned to the staff station near the service area to drop her notes and pick up another order slip, her hands started to shake. Not openly, just a small tremble that came when the adrenaline finally began to leave her body. She gripped the edge of the counter for a moment and breathed. She could still hear Cynthia's voice in her head. She could still feel the way the room had stared. She could still see Victor's face from afar. And now another feeling entered her chest. Fear. Not fear of Cynthia alone. Fear of what happened next. Because she knew Nigeria. In Nigeria, a poor worker is always the easiest scapegoat. If something went wrong, they would not question the rich person first. They would question the staff. If someone screamed, they would assume the poor person was guilty. If there was confusion, they would choose the weakest person to blame so the matter could end quickly. Alice stared down at the order pad, but her mind was somewhere else. Had I acted bravely, or had I made a mistake? She thought of her father in the hospital. She thought of the envelope on her table. Money for Daddy. She thought of the way Victor could fire her with one sentence, and she suddenly felt the weight of what she had done. Not just speaking back, but being seen. Because once you are seen, people can target you. Alice swallowed and forced her hands to be still. She lifted her chin, took a slow breath, and returned to work. But deep inside her, a quiet voice kept whispering the same question again and again. Was tonight the beginning of something good? Or the beginning of trouble? Not long after, Cynthia pushed her plate away. She hadn't eaten much. William wiped his mouth with a napkin, glanced at his watch, and spoke with the flat tone of someone ready to end the night. "Bring the bill," he said. "Yes, sir," Alice replied. She went to the service station, printed the bill, checked it twice, and returned to table 7 with the leather holder. She placed it down gently. William opened it without drama. He reached into his wallet and brought out a sleek platinum card, the kind that looked heavy even though it was small. He slid it into the holder and pushed it back toward Alice. "Take," he said, short and direct. Alice picked it up carefully. "Yes, sir." She walked back to the staff station, where the POS machine sat on the counter like a small judge that approved or rejected people's lives. The station was busy. Plates were moving, receipts were printing, staff were rushing past each other in quiet panic. Alice inserted the card into the machine, entered the amount, and waited. The machine beeped softly. Approved. She exhaled without realizing she had been holding her breath. She printed the receipt. She placed the receipt neatly inside the holder, tucked the card inside the proper space and held it tight like it was glass. Then she walked back to the table. Her steps were steady. She stopped at the same polite distance and placed the holder down. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. William barely nodded. Then Cynthia's voice cut through the air. Sharp, loud, too loud. "Where is the card?" Alice blinked. For a second she thought she didn't hear well. Cynthia was staring at the holder like it had insulted her. Alice's heart jumped. "Madam," Alice began slowly, confused. "It's inside." Cynthia interrupted immediately, her voice rising higher. "It's not there. It's gone." Her words were loud enough to travel. Loud enough to turn heads. Loud enough to pull attention the way a slap pulls attention. Alice's mouth went dry. "Madam, I put it..." Cynthia stood up slightly from her chair, leaning forward as if she wanted the whole lounge to witness her anger. "She took it," Cynthia said, pointing straight at Alice. The room started to quiet again. Not fully, but enough. People were listening. Cynthia's eyes were bright with something hot and ugly. "Check her apron," she snapped. "Check her pockets." Then she turned her head and called out like she owned the place. "Call security, now!" Alice felt the world tilt. Her chest went cold. She looked at William. Maybe he would calm her down. Maybe he would say, "Relax, let's check properly." But William's face had changed too. Not with anger. With surprise. With uncertainty. Like even he didn't know what Cynthia was about to turn this into. Alice's lips trembled, but she forced her voice out. "Madam, please. I didn't take any card." Cynthia's laugh was bitter. "You didn't?" she said loudly. "So are you saying the card walked away by itself?" Her finger stayed pointed at Alice like a weapon. The lounge was quiet now. Quiet in the dangerous way. And Alice suddenly understood. This was not confusion. This was not a mistake. This was the revenge Cynthia had been cooking in her eyes since earlier. And now, with everybody watching, Cynthia was ready to destroy her. Victor Adebayo appeared almost immediately. It was as if someone had pressed a bell and summoned him. He rushed to table 7 with quick steps, his face already wet with sweat, his tie slightly crooked from moving too fast. His eyes moved from Cynthia to William, then to Alice, like he was trying to understand where the fire started and how to stop it before it burned the whole lounge. "Madam Cynthia," Victor began, forcing a smile that didn't look real. "Please, let us—" Cynthia didn't let him finish. She turned toward him like a wounded queen. "You people hire thieves and call it service," she said loudly, her voice shaking with fake pain. "No wonder she was acting all high and mighty. She was just biding her time to steal from us." The words hit the room like a plate smashing on the floor. Some people gasped softly. Some people turned fully now. Cynthia lifted her hand to her chest as if she was the one being attacked. "I want the police called," she said. "Immediately." Alice's lips parted, but no words came out. Her blood turned to ice. For 1 second, she wasn't standing in the lounge again. She was in the hospital corridor, seeing her father on that bed, weak, half speaking, one side of his body refusing to move. She saw the envelope on her small table at home. Money for Daddy. She saw herself losing this job. She saw her mother's face, the tired disappointment, the fear. "Alice, what did you do? Why can't you just keep quiet and work?" And then the worst picture flashed in her mind. Police. The harsh voice. Hands pulling her. People watching. A poor woman dragged like a criminal while the rich people stood safe and clean. Alice swallowed hard, forcing her voice out. "Madam, please," she said, trembling now. "I didn't take your card. I swear." Cynthia's eyes were bright, almost excited. "Search her," she insisted. "Check her apron, check her pockets. Let her prove she's not a thief." Toby Okiki stood nearby with a tray in his hand, frozen. His face was pale. His mouth was slightly open, like he wanted to speak but didn't know how. At the bar, Sandra Ibrahim gripped the edge hard, her knuckles turning white. Her eyes stayed fixed on Cynthia with quiet anger. From the kitchen doors, Chef Mike Ajayi stepped out. He didn't come out fully at first, but his face was tight, his jaw hard, like he was holding himself back from saying something dangerous. Victor turned to Alice and lowered his voice, but his words were still sharp. "Alice," he said, "just cooperate. Let's clear this quickly." Alice stared at him. "Sir, cooperate how?" she whispered. Victor avoided her eyes. It wasn't because he believed Cynthia. It was because he was afraid of her. Afraid of the money she represented. Afraid of scandal. Afraid of anything that could touch the lounge's name. "Just do it," he said quickly, "so we can end this matter." Alice's chest tightened. End it? How could it end if they touched her like a criminal in front of everyone? How could it end if the police came? How could it end if William's fiancé had already decided she was guilty? Cynthia's voice rose again. "What are we waiting for? Call security. Call police." Then, through the noise, a calm voice entered the room. Not loud, not angry, just calm, like cold water poured on fire. "That won't be necessary." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Everyone turned. Slowly, at a table not far away, an elderly man rose to his feet. He did not rush. He did not shout. He stood with quiet confidence, old wealth, old authority, the kind that didn't need to prove itself. His hair was gray. His suit was perfectly fitted. His posture was straight, like he had been standing tall all his life. This was Chief Maxwell Rotimi. Some people in the lounge immediately shifted in their seats, like they recognized him and suddenly remembered how to behave. Chief Maxwell walked toward table 7 with steady steps. The room made space for him without him asking. Cynthia blinked, annoyed, and tried to dismiss him with a tight smile. "Sir, this is private," she said, waving her hand slightly. "This is between me and your staff." Chief Maxwell stopped near them and looked at her. His eyes were calm. His voice was calm too. But his words were firm. "You are causing noise in my establishment," he said. Cynthia's smile faltered. Victor's face changed, like his stomach dropped. William sat up straighter, suddenly alert. Chief Maxwell turned slightly. "What is happening here?" he asked. Cynthia immediately stepped forward, ready to perform again. "She processed our payment," Cynthia said, shaking her head like she was heartbroken. "And now my fiancé's card is missing. She is the last person who touched it. The card is gone, so clearly she took it." Then she pointed at Alice again, like pointing could make it true. Alice stood still, her hands by her side, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Chief Maxwell looked at Alice briefly. Just one look. But in that brief moment, something flickered across his face. Not shock, not anger, something like recognition. Then his eyes returned to Cynthia, calm as ever. "All right," he said simply. "We will handle this properly." And the way he said properly made Cynthia's confidence shift for the first time. Chief Maxwell turned fully to Cynthia. His voice remained calm, but it was no longer soft. "Madam," he said, "have you checked your own bag?" Cynthia answered too fast. "Yes," she said. "Of course I have." Chief Maxwell held her gaze. "Check again," he said. "Properly." Cynthia's smile twitched. For a second, she looked like she wanted to laugh it off, to wave it away like it was nothing. But Chief Maxwell didn't move. He didn't blink too much. He didn't give her room to perform. Then he lifted his hand slightly and gestured toward the corner of the dining area. A small dark camera sat there, quiet and watching. The CCTV. Cynthia's eyes followed his gesture. Her face changed. Just for a second. Shock flashed across it. It was clear she didn't expect it. This was a private dining lounge, the kind of place where rich people like to feel untouchable, the kind of place where they assumed their actions would not be recorded. But the camera was there. And in that moment, Cynthia began to fidget. Her fingers tightened around her clutch. Her shoulders lifted slightly. She was no longer enjoying the drama. She was now calculating. Security moved closer, not rough, not grabbing anyone, just stepping in with quiet presence. Two men in black stood a little behind Chief Maxwell, their faces expressionless. The whole room held its breath. Even the music suddenly felt quieter. William sat forward. His brows were drawn. He looked stunned. He had been on his phone when the card was returned earlier. He had only heard Cynthia's loud accusation and assumed the card was truly missing. Now his eyes moved between Cynthia and the clutch in her hand. Chief Maxwell nodded once, still watching Cynthia. "Go ahead," he said. "Check." Cynthia forced a small laugh. "It's fine," she said, opening her clutch. "Maybe it slipped somewhere else." She began to search inside, but she was not searching calmly. Her hands moved fast. Too fast. Her fingers shook slightly. She removed lipstick, tissue, keys, placing them back quickly like she wanted the moment to pass. One of the security men stepped forward slightly. His voice was respectful but firm. "Madame," he said, "let me help you. Please hand it over." Cynthia's head snapped up. "No," she said quickly, hugging the clutch closer. "Why would I hand my bag to you?" More eyes turned. More silence fell. Chief Maxwell's gaze stayed steady. The security man didn't move back. "Madam," he repeated, "if you want this resolved peacefully, allow us." Cynthia's mouth opened again to refuse. But she looked around and saw all the eyes on her. Too many eyes. Eyes that were no longer looking at Alice. Eyes that were now judging her. Slowly, Cynthia's grip loosened. And with a tight smile that looked painful, she handed the clutch over. The security man opened it carefully, checked inside once, then checked again. And then his hand paused. He pulled out a sleek platinum card, the same kind of card William had given Alice. He held it up so it could be seen clearly. For a second, the whole lounge froze. Then the dining room exhaled. A collective breath, like people had been holding it in their lungs without realizing. Alice felt her knees go weak. Her throat tightened. Not from shame now. From relief that almost felt like pain. Cynthia stood still like a statue. Her face drained slowly, as if the blood was leaving it in shame. Then she forced words out quickly, trying to twist it. "It must have slipped," she said. "Maybe when she returned it... No." Chief Maxwell's one word cut through everything. Just one word. But it landed like a heavy object. He stepped closer, his tone still calm, but now sharp in its truth. "You were humiliated," he said plainly. Cynthia blinked, her eyes wide. "So you wanted revenge," Chief Maxwell continued. "You manufactured a theft accusation to destroy a worker." The words fell clean and direct. No drama, no long speech, just truth. William's face changed. Stunned first. Then shame followed quickly like a shadow. Because now he could see it. He could see what his silence had allowed. Cynthia tried to smile again, tried to save herself. "Sir," she began, her voice softer now. "I didn't know you were..." Chief Maxwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "So you only behave when someone powerful is watching?" he asked. Cynthia's mouth closed. Chief Maxwell turned his head slightly toward Alice, then back to Cynthia. "Apologize," he said. Cynthia's face tightened. She looked at Alice like Alice was dirt, like apologizing to her would stain her. For a moment she stood there, refusing with her body even if her mouth didn't speak. Chief Maxwell didn't rush her. He let the silence do its work. Then he spoke again, still calm. "You made a false accusation," he said. "You attempted to frame an employee. We have security footage. If I choose, I can file a police report tonight." Cynthia swallowed. Chief Maxwell continued, his voice steady. "And do not forget," he said, "your family's company has dealings with my financial group. Those relationships can be reviewed immediately if you continue this nonsense." His eyes stayed on her, unblinking. "And being rich," he added, "or hanging around rich people, does not make you better than everyone else." Cynthia's lips trembled slightly. She turned to William as if to find rescue, but William only stared at her, silent, cold, no comfort, no defense. That silence told her everything. She was alone now. Slowly, Cynthia turned back to Alice. Her face was tight, her eyes bitter. She forced the words out like they were burning her tongue. "I'm sorry," she said through clenched teeth. Alice didn't speak immediately. She just stood there, breathing, trying to steady herself. Because in Nigeria, even when you are innocent, the fear does not leave quickly. And even when the truth comes out, the damage still shakes your bones. Alice stood there, breathing slowly, trying to keep her face steady. Cynthia's apology still hung in the air like smoke. For a second, Cynthia looked like she believed that was the end of it. Like if she just said sorry, everything would calm down and return to normal. She adjusted her dress slightly, lifted her chin again, tried to wear her pride like it still fit. But then William Adeyemi finally spoke. His voice was quiet, not loud enough to draw attention by force. Yet it drew attention because of how cold it was. "Cynthia," he said. Cynthia turned quickly, like a child looking for comfort. "Yes, baby." William's eyes stayed on her, hard and clear. He didn't look confused anymore. He looked like a man seeing something he had ignored for too long. "This is your true character," he said. Cynthia's smile twitched. "No, it's not like that." William didn't let her build excuses. "This is not the first time," he continued, still calm. "You have done things like this before." Cynthia's face tightened. William's voice stayed controlled, but his words became sharper. He leaned forward slightly, speaking like a man speaking to himself as much as to her. "Every time you treat people like they are nothing," he said, "I told myself you were just spoiled, that you would grow out of it, that you didn't mean it." Cynthia reached for his arm quickly, her voice dropping into a beg. "Baby, it was just anger." William pulled his arm away gently, but firmly. His eyes didn't soften. "You tried to destroy someone's life because you were embarrassed," he said simply. "You were ready to call the police and have her locked up. You wanted to end her job and her name, just because she defended herself." Cynthia swallowed. "It wasn't like that," she whispered. "I was just..." "Don't," William said. One word. Flat. Final. He looked at her like he was tired. He looked at her like he had finally accepted something painful. You have insulted people in public, he said. You have embarrassed workers. You've spoken to staff like they were bought in the market. I kept excusing it. His jaw tightened. But this one, he added, is too much. Cynthia's eyes shone with panic now. William, please. William's voice didn't rise. He didn't need to. Give me the ring, he said. Cynthia froze. What? She asked, as if she didn't hear. The engagement ring, William repeated. Give it to me. Cynthia's face changed quickly, from shock to anger. Over this? She snapped in a low voice, trying to keep her embarrassment private. William, you can't be serious. You want to collect ring because of something so little? William stared at her. His tone stayed calm. Trying to step on people because you feel they are beneath you is not little, he said. Trying to send a working woman to jail because she embarrassed you is not little. Cynthia shook her head, grasping for excuses. I didn't mean it like that. It was confusion. The card. The card was in your bag, William said, cutting through her. Cynthia's lips trembled. She looked around and realized the room was still watching. Not openly, but enough. Chief Maxwell was standing quietly nearby. Victor was stiff like wood. Even some guests were pretending not to look, while still listening. Cynthia's pride fought her shame. For a moment she held her hand close to her chest, as if the ring was the only thing holding her steady. Then slowly, very slowly, she slid it off. Her fingers shook as she removed it. She placed it on the table. It landed with a soft click. A small sound. But it felt loud. Cynthia stared at the ring for a second like she couldn't believe her life had reached this point. Then she stood up. She didn't apologize again. She didn't look at Alice. She only lifted her chin, trying to carry what was left of her dignity. And she walked out, exposed. The room stayed silent until the sound of her heels faded away. William remained seated for a moment, staring at the table like a man who had just dropped something heavy from his hand. Then Chief Maxwell turned to Alice. His voice softened, the sharpness gone. Miss Nwankwo, he said gently, join me in my office. Alice's heart jumped again. For a second she thought her legs would fail her. Office? Her mind rushed fast. Is he about to fire me? Is he about to blame me for the scene? She glanced at Victor. Victor Adebayo looked like he might collapse. His face was pale, his lips slightly open. He couldn't even hide his fear. Alice followed Chief Maxwell quietly. Her hands were still shaking. Inside the office it was calm and neat, lined with framed photographs and awards. Chief Maxwell sat down slowly and looked at her with a steady expression. Alice stood, unsure where to place her hands. Chief Maxwell spoke without wasting time. 2 years ago, he said, I attended a symposium in Abuja. Alice blinked. Chief Maxwell continued. You were one of the presenters. Alice's breath caught. Chief Maxwell's eyes stayed on her. You spoke about language and power, he said. You spoke about how people are mocked, suppressed, and erased through the way they speak. It was rare. It was brilliant. Alice felt dizzy. Chief Maxwell leaned forward slightly. I was impressed, he said. So I asked for your contact. I wanted to offer you a role at my foundation. Alice's voice came out as a whisper. But You vanished, Chief Maxwell said gently. No email, no forwarding address, nothing. Life swallowed you. Alice's eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. Chief Maxwell's voice remained calm. Tonight, he said, I recognized you. Not by your uniform, not by your face alone. He paused, then added slowly. By your knowledge, by your confidence, by the way you spoke about language like it matters, like it has power. Alice swallowed hard, because she knew that was true. And for the first time in a long time, someone else knew it too. Alice stood there, blinking back tears that refused to stay hidden. Chief Maxwell watched her quietly for a moment, as if he was allowing her heart to catch up with his words. Then he spoke again. This is why I called you in, he said. He reached for a file on the table beside him and opened it calmly, like what he was about to say was normal business. But to Alice, it didn't feel normal at all. "I am setting up a foundation," Chief Maxwell said, "to protect endangered languages and cultural history." Alice's eyebrows lifted slightly. Something like that was not common. Not in a country where most people were fighting just to eat, just to survive, just to pay school fees. Chief Maxwell continued, his voice steady. "Many of our languages are dying quietly," he said. "Not because they are useless, but because shame has been poured on them. People hide their mother tongue. Parents tell their children to stop speaking it so they won't be mocked. And slowly, we lose pieces of ourselves." He paused, then added, "And I also want the foundation to study something deeper, how language has been used to control people, how it has been used to silence people, how it has been used to decide who deserves respect and who does not." Alice's chest tightened. She could feel how serious he was. Chief Maxwell looked at her. "I have been looking for someone knowledgeable," he said, "and passionate. Someone who understands that language is not only words, it is identity, it is history, it is power." He tapped the file gently. "And tonight, I saw you." Alice's lips trembled. Chief Maxwell's voice remained calm, but his words carried weight. "I want you to lead it," he said simply. Alice froze. Lead it? Her mind struggled to understand. Chief Maxwell continued before she could speak. "This is not a small role," he said. "It is a top leadership position. The salary is big, enough for you to breathe again, full benefits, everything done properly." Alice's throat tightened as he leaned forward slightly. "And most importantly," he said, "your father will receive care at our partner neurological rehabilitation center. Proper therapy, proper medication, 24-hour nursing, a clean place, a private space, a team that knows what they are doing, a place where he is treated like a human being, not like a burden." Alice's eyes widened. For a second, she couldn't move. She couldn't even breathe properly. Then the tears came. Not small tears. Not quiet tears. Real tears. The kind that rose from deep inside, from years of fear and tiredness and silent begging. Alice covered her mouth with her hand, but it didn't stop anything. Her shoulders shook. Her chest tightened. She cried like someone who had been holding a heavy load for too long and suddenly felt it lift. Chief Maxwell waited, allowing her to cry. When Alice finally found her voice, it came out broken. "Sir," she whispered, wiping her face. "Why? Why me?" Chief Maxwell looked at her steadily. Then he spoke in one long, clear speech, slow, deliberate, like he meant every word. "Because words can free a person or destroy a person," he said. "I have watched how people use accent, grammar, and foreign tongues to shame others into silence. I have watched brilliant people shrink because the world kept telling them they were nothing. But tonight, you refused to be erased. You did not insult anybody, you did not fight dirty. You only stood in the truth with control and with dignity. And that kind of mind, that kind of courage, is rare. Your father worked hard for you to become who you are, and he deserves to see his daughter live, not just survive. He deserves to see you stand in the light of your own gift, not die slowly inside a uniform. You have carried too much for too long. Let someone help you carry it now." Alice stared at him, crying harder. Because for the first time in 2 years, the world was not demanding from her. It was giving. Chief Maxwell closed the file gently. "If you agree," he said, "you can start tomorrow." Alice's hands shook as she wiped her face again. Tomorrow. It sounded like a miracle. And she didn't know yet that when the sun rose, her life would begin again. 6 months later, Alice walked down a quiet hallway and stopped in front of a door. Sweet door. Not a crowded ward. Not a noisy corridor full of people begging nurses for attention. A proper place. She pushed the door open gently. Morning light filled the room, soft and clean, pouring in through wide windows. The air smelled fresh, not like medicine and fear. The room was calm, quiet in a peaceful way, not the kind of silence that comes from suffering. There were therapy tools arranged neatly, a therapy ball, light weights, a walking frame, clean mats. Everything looked like it belonged to healing, not managing people until they give up. Alice stepped in slowly, as if she was still afraid the place would disappear if she moved too fast. Her mother was already there. Mrs. Nwankwo sat beside the bed in a chair, her wrapper neat, her headscarf tied carefully. She looked smaller than she used to look, but her eyes were brighter now. When she saw Alice, she smiled. Full smile, the kind she hadn't worn in a long time. "My daughter," her mother said softly, like she was tasting the words. Alice smiled back. "Good morning, Mummy." Then Alice turned toward the man by the window. Her father. Mr. Nwankwo sat in a cushioned chair, his posture stronger than before. His left side was still slower, still not perfect, but there was life in him again. His right hand rested on a therapy ball, squeezing it gently like someone doing real work. He looked up when Alice entered, and for a moment his eyes filled. He opened his mouth, and he called her name clearly. Alice. Not broken, not half said. Clear. Alice's breath caught. Her father's lips trembled. Tears rolled down his cheeks without shame. "Alice Nwankwo," he said again, slower but full. "My daughter." Alice walked forward quickly, her eyes burning. She was not wearing a tight uniform anymore. No bow tie. No stiff shirt cutting into her shoulders. She wore a charcoal suit that fit properly, the kind that did not beg for respect. It carried it. Her heels were proper and comfortable, not knockoffs splitting at the sole. Her hair was neat, cared for, the way a woman's hair looks when she finally has time to breathe. She dropped to her knees beside her father's chair like she had done many times in the hospital. But this time her knees touched a clean floor and her heart felt different. She held his hand carefully. "I'm here," she whispered. Her father squeezed her hand. Her mother stood up slowly, smiling, her eyes shining with tears. She touched Alice's shoulder gently and looked up, as if speaking to God directly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for the gift of our daughter." They sat together like that for a moment. Three people who had been stretched by life but had not snapped. Then her father spoke again, his voice still a little slow but real. How is work?" he asked. Alice laughed softly through tears. "It's going well, Daddy." Her mother sat back down and shook her head with a small smile. "Who would have thought," she said quietly, "that all this suffering will still bring us to a day like this?" Alice nodded. She didn't have big words for it, only truth. "We are here," she said. "That is what matters." Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message. From her assistant. Alice glanced at it and her eyes widened slightly. Conference confirmed. Many attendees registered. Dr. Eze will be keynote. Her former lecturer. The same woman who once told her, "Your work is rare, authentic, out of the box." Alice stared at the message for a second, then looked at her father again. Her father was watching her face like he could read the good news from her eyes. "What is it?" he asked. Alice swallowed. "Daddy," she said softly. "My first conference is confirmed." Her father's eyes widened. "Conference?" he repeated, like the word was precious. Alice nodded. "Yes, people are coming. Many people." Her father's voice shook. "God," he whispered, and tears rolled again. "My brilliant daughter." Alice looked down, smiling, because the words still entered her heart the same way. At the same time, outside of Alice's new life, another story was burning quietly. Cynthia Maduka's world did not survive that night. Because in Nigeria, scandal is not small. Scandal is fire. The security footage didn't spread to everybody, not to random people. It spread to the people that mattered in Cynthia's circle. The kind of people who smiled in public but took notes in private. The kind of people who didn't like trouble near their name. The footage moved from phone to phone, from quiet sitting room to quiet sitting room. People watched Cynthia point at a working woman, watched her demand police, watched her pretend to be a victim while the cards sat in her own bag. And slowly, the big girl respect around her began to dry up. Partnerships became, "We'll get back to you." Invitations stopped coming. Friends who used to laugh around her started avoiding her calls. People who once praised her confidence now called her a problem behind her back. Cynthia tried to act like she didn't care, but she cared. She cared when she started sitting alone in places where she used to arrive with noise. She cared when her name stopped opening doors. She cared when she saw online whispers and side comments that didn't mention her name, but somehow still described her perfectly. And the worst cut came from William. Not because he shouted. William never needed to shout. He simply moved on. One day, Cynthia saw pictures. William stepping out with another woman, calm and relaxed, like a man who had removed a burden from his life. Cynthia cried that night until her eyes swelled. Not because she felt truly sorry for what she did, but because she hated losing. Because she could not accept that one poor waitress had become the turning point of her life. And even after everything, Cynthia still didn't change inside. She still looked down on the poor. She still believed some people were beneath her. She didn't want to associate with Alice, not even in her mind. She told herself it was disrespect that ruined her life, not her own wickedness. But life did not agree with her excuses. Life simply moved on without her. Back in the rehab suite, Alice stood up slowly and wiped her face. Her father held her hand again like he was afraid she would disappear. Alice smiled at him. She looked at her mother. Then she looked out the window at the morning light. She remembered the dining lounge, the scuffed shoes, the tight uniform, the way people called her you there, the way she used to feel like air. And she said the truth softly, as if sealing it in her heart. "I was invisible once," Alice said, "but not anymore.